Welcome to our one-on-one discussion with the major candidates for the next mayor of Boston. My name is Jim Rooney, and I'm president and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. This organization is the region's leading business voice, and we represent 1,300 businesses who collectively employ hundreds of thousands of people in and around Boston. Candidates are participating in many forums around the city, and in this conversation, we want to focus on the issues that are priorities for the business community of Boston and the big and small employers who drive economic success by creating and sustaining jobs. For many years now, Boston has enjoyed tremendous growth. The city attracts young talent, incubates life-changing innovations, and supports new development. We punch above our weight, so to speak, because we account for 2.2% of national GDP, even though we account for just 1.5% of the national population. The next mayor has the challenge of maintaining this in a changed world. We've seen in the last year that a city's economic vibrancy and success is fragile, and across the US, both businesses and people are relocating. Oftentimes, these relocations are driven by the cost of living and working, regulation, taxation, issues of public safety, and failures of local and state government to meet the needs of its key industries and businesses. The risks are acute for Boston because we rely mightily on talented employers that are mobile. In our next mayor, the business community seeks a partner who is willing to work side by side to compete in the global and mobile economy. Today's discussion is one way to learn how candidates will do that. The candidates also completed a questionnaire we developed, and the responses are posted on our website. The candidate field will be narrowed to 2 finalists in a citywide election on Tuesday, September 14th. The Chamber hopes all Bostonians will engage in this election by learning about the candidates and exercising their right and privilege to vote on Election Day. Our purpose at the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce is to make Boston the best place for all businesses and all people to succeed. So let's have a conversation about how we can do that together. I'm pleased to introduce candidate and city councilor Annissa Essaibi George. Annissa is a mom, former Boston Public Schools teacher, small business owner, first-generation American, and lifelong resident who was elected as an at-large Boston City Councilor in 2015. Annissa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for having me on today.
There's a lot we'd like to cover, so we'll ask you to keep your answers succinct. First, the big question, why are you running for mayor?
Well, first, the response is politicians, elected officials, and those that want to serve as mayor of this city. Keeping answers succinct may be difficult, but I will do my very best. As you mentioned in your intro of me, I am a lifelong Bostonian, a former classroom teacher, and spent 13 years at East Boston High School. I am a small business owner and very much invested in my neighborhood, in my community, and in the city that I call home. I believe that I am the right leader for this city, this great city of Boston at this moment, thinking about the challenges that we're in the midst of, and really the promise of our city's future. I look forward to leading the city through this, very special and what can be a spectacular time going forward.
Great. I want to shift to one of the biggest challenges facing not just the new mayor, but all of us, and that is tackling equity and economic inclusion. Issues of racism, inequity, the gaps in our society have been appropriately elevated in our public discourse. And you've spoken about this, but what do you think the business community's role is in creating a more equitable Boston?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's settled science, especially and certainly for me, but I think for you as well, and the business community, that racism and inequity exists in all of the systems that we have in today's society. And we need to certainly work in partnership, as you mentioned in some of your opening comments. We need to work in partnership to make sure that every day we are focused on dismantling that and creating greater access and more opportunity for all of our city's residents, but especially those that have been greatly disenfranchised and separated from those opportunities over time. When I think about my role, my capacity as mayor of this city, and we think about the ever evolving and changing and adapting and growing business community here in the city of Boston, this is work that we need to do in partnership with one another. I'm committed to doing that. I know you are committing to doing that. And it's about making sure that industry is at the table, making sure that as a city we're preparing for that talent to be embraced by the business community and by new industry here in the city. But if we aren't doing that work together, if we aren't collaborating and doing it in partnership, we won't ever create those opportunities, those direct pipelines to opportunity for all of our cities residents.
Right. I want to move on to real estate development, which at times can be controversial, but it's an important part of our economic growth. And I want to focus on the review process. What's your view of the city's development review process? We've heard people say it needs to be streamlined and changed. What does that even mean?
Well, certainly there's some general agreement that the process needs to be streamlined, that there has to be greater transparency and more opportunity to engage in that process in a very sort of public and transparent way. And those are, I think, for elected officials and politicians and those running for office, those are all, wonderful key phrases or hashtags to use when discussing the work that needs to happen in order to continue to grow our city, but grow it in a smart and thoughtful way. For me, when we think about the role of developing our city, of planning our city, of growing our city, especially realizing, recognizing the economic opportunity that that brings to our city that allows us to do other things like invest in our schools and invest in infrastructure, improve the conditions of our roads and our transit system, making sure that our cities are safe and remain safe through time. We have to do this work together, but the development process in particular, especially for me, I'm committed to making sure that this city continues to have opportunities to grow, that we do it in a thoughtful and very intentional way, that we are looking at planning separate from development so that we can be smart about the city's growth, but then do the work and continuing to build our city in a way that makes our city more attractive to invest in and to attract talent to, but certainly build the local assets that we have, especially our people, for those new opportunities. So growth is important, making sure that that growth creates opportunities for our city's people. We have to do it together. And, again, back to your opening remarks around partnership and collaboration, we have to do this work together, have to do it in the public space, have to do it in a very smart and intentional way.
I want to stick with development and talk about development of the Seaport District. It's been criticized, I think, by most of the candidates. What do you think went wrong with the way the development's unfolded? What would you have done differently, or what would you do differently with such an opportunity going forward?
Yeah, no, the Seaport is certainly a fascinating case study and doing things, again, in the right way and then in the wrong way. And, certainly the challenges around the location of the Seaport, thinking about the water and how beautiful the access to the water is, but also proximity to the airport. And I remember, I think it's 20 plus years ago, attending community meetings around the redevelopment and the rezoning and the planning for the Seaport, and realizing because of FAA requirements and restrictions, there's very specific height requirements. So then we moved to fill every parcel to its maximum capacity. And that's why we saw, especially in early planning and early building, super density without sort of unique or authentic or aesthetically pleasing architecture and design. We're seeing that shift now in some of the newer growth and development and building that's happened in the Seaport is a little bit more diverse and certainly more aesthetically pleasing. We've got to continue on that path as the Seaport continues to get developed, but also making sure that it isn't anywhere USA. And in some parts of the Seaport, if, me, born and raised in this city, if I'm in the Seaport, especially if I can't see the water, I don't know where I am. And I literally could be anywhere USA. And that to me is very unfortunate. We also need to make sure that we are creating opportunities for the city's people to have experiences in the Seaport, that businesses are owned by people that live in the city, that grew up in the city, that ownership of both small businesses and the housing down there is also reflective of the people of Boston. There is unfortunately a great lack of diversity when it comes to the people that live and work and own in the Seaport. And we've got to be very intentional about changing that, not just that narrative, but that reality for the Seaport. And I think certainly when we work with new industries who want to locate in the Seaport, that we're doing that together, and that we're also making sure that residents and tourists and those that spend the day in the city of Boston, if they're coming here to work, have access to the waterfront, and that we're also being thoughtful about the impacts of climate change on both the Seaport and what we do there, how it impacts the rest of our city coming inland.
Right. So let's talk about education. The business community cares deeply about education because today's students are tomorrow's workforce. During the pandemic, the poor condition of the schools in Boston, the physical condition, was highlighted as a need of significant capital investment, requiring more money than the city has or could possibly have. Before spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the school facilities, do we have too many school buildings? As mayor, how would you address the results of the 2015 audit that revealed that BPS should consolidate schools? And I think since then, the population of the Boston public school system has gone down further by about 3,800 students. So do we have too many school buildings?
No, that's a great question. We think about our schools' facilities, we think about capacity, we think about the academic experience and the enrichment that happens in our schools. And we think back to that report from a number of years ago, and I think appreciate some of the flaws that were in that report. Jimmy, you know that I spent 13 years in the classroom, and when I read that report, it, although highlighted some of the capacity opportunities we have across our school district, some of the math that was used, some of the formulas to determine whether or not we had enough academic or classroom space, that we had enough opportunity to teach lab sciences in an appropriate way, that we had an opportunity to do, whether it was art instruction, music instruction, having appropriate theater space and open space for student activities and experiences. There were some flaws in that formula. And I think that that report shouldn't be used to judge. It can guide some of the conversation, but not be used to judge the future of our school facilities. And also it needs to be noted, as Mayor Walsh, then Mayor Walsh, invested $1 billion in the Build BPS plan, which was an extensive facilities plan. And the intention of that work was for some significant improvements, renovations, and rebuilds of our school district. $1 billion touches very few schools. It probably touches about 10 schools out of 125 buildings in a significant way. So we need billions of dollars more. We need to also look at our facilities and our capacity and consider the need for swing space as we do start to renovate and rebuild our schools across the district, and also look towards this conversation around whether it's the World War II era buildings or the more recently built buildings, which are actually in greater disrepair. The World War II buildings are actually our most solid, most sort of strong and well-built buildings. Certainly need significant renovations and retrofitting. The newer buildings are the ones that are literally and figuratively collapsing on our kids. So yes, we need additional investment in our facilities. Yes, we need to make sure that we've got grade configurations right, that we have seats for a changing demographic when we think about the age of our children in each of our neighborhoods, that we have enough seats appropriate for that age group of kids. And when we make those decisions about shifting student populations, whether it's mergers and consolidations or potential closures, that we are doing it in a really thoughtful way and not basing those decisions off of a study that I believe was flawed. Yes, we see in the Boston Public Schools declining enrollment, and I think that that's due in large part to some of the significant failures around Boston Public Schools. This last year, some real challenges in making sure that our kids were able to access academics, that kids were able to access some of the support services that they rely on during the school day. We saw how important food was for our kids and how we needed to make sure that our kids were fed every day. But within our school district, and you also in that question talk about how important, especially public education, high school or K to 12 education is here in the city to recruiting new industry, recruiting new companies, retaining and attracting talent. Our schools play an important role in all of those pieces. And if we don't have a K to 12 system that is aligned, that grade configurations make sense, that high quality, rigorous academic instruction can be delivered, that there can be special education services that start at the earliest grade, that we have aligned curriculum, that we have literacy that we're teaching, especially in those early grades, that we aren't making thoughtful decisions to support the whole child. And then when it comes to spending, if we aren't answering the question, every $1 we spent, and the city's budget for our Boston Public Schools is $1.3 billion. If we aren't able to answer the question, how is this $1 directly impacting our kids, our students across our district, we are going to continue to fail too many of our kids. I'm committed to that work, from brick and mortar to academic supports to wraparound services and everything in between for our kids. And it is one of the most important jobs, tasks, responsibilities of the mayor of this city. And I look forward to leading on that.
Right. I want to shift to public safety. In my opening remarks, I noted that some of the relocations that we see in cities across the country are because of feelings about public safety. There's been movements to defund the police that have swept across America. What does that phrase mean to you, and what would the Boston Police Department 2023 budget look like in a George administration? I know that this year's budget, the Boston police budget was cut. What would it look like if you were elected mayor?
So first I'd say it wouldn't be the George administration, but the Essaibi George administration. And when I think about the defund movement, it's just absolute nonsense to be talking in those terms and using those phrases. Like education, when I think about the responsibility I have to lead this city as mayor of this city, when I think about the tasks and the commitment I need to have in this city, it's certainly leading on education and supporting the Boston Public Schools. It's leading on public transportation and making sure that those public goods are high quality goods and good for the public. And public safety falls in line with one of the core responsibilities of leading this city. Every community should be free of violence. Every community should feel safe to go out for an evening walk, for a grandmother to sit on her porch, for a child to play at the playground, for a kid to come to and from school. Every community deserves that safety. And when we think about the work that we need to do as a city to fulfill that promise of public safety, we need to do it in partnership with our Boston Police Department, with our community members, with our nonprofit-based organizations that are doing work around violence prevention. And Boston has been the leader, has been the model in community policing, but that certificate is outdated. We received that acknowledgement, that recognition under the Obama administration. And it's so important that we continue to fulfill that promise of community policing and make sure that we are continuing to invest in community policing, investing in the work of crime prevention and violence prevention, and investing in the work around solving unsolved homicides in particular. Too many families today do not know what happened to their loved ones. We need to continue to do that work and certainly do it in partnership with our police officers, with our community members, with our families who continue to feel that pain and that trauma, and also do the work in partnership with organizations who are doing trauma response, who are helping, respond to some of the symptoms of poverty and the challenges that violence has brought to too many of our neighborhoods. For me, it's about investing in appropriate policing, investing in the true notion and truly celebrate the concept of community policing and making sure that every day we are committed to that work, that we are focused on that work, and that community and police are at the table together doing that work. As mayor, I will bring those different facets of our city, of our communities together to make sure that we are fulfilling the goals of community policing every single day in every one of our neighborhoods for every one of our residents.
Well, Annissa, our 20 minutes has gone by way too fast, so I would offer you the opportunity to offer some closing remarks to the business community and maybe answer the question, what can the business community expect from an Essaibi George administration?
Well, I appreciate that so much, Jim. And, I think in your opening remarks, you talk about our city or your organization punching above its weight. When I think about Boston, every single day we're punching above our weight. We are doing more to support our kids across our school district. We are doing more to improve transportation systems across our district. We're doing more in response to the public health needs, whether it's around homelessness, substance use disorder, improving access to mental health. We're doing more to make sure that our city is safe. And I will continue to lead on those issues as mayor of the city of Boston. But this work can't be done alone. I often, and on occasion, not often, but on occasion, I use this hashtag, government is a team sport. And that's about government officials and elected officials working together to answer the needs of our city's residents and those that are doing business in our city. But government is a team sport is also about government and the mayor's office, my office, the Essaibi George administration in particular, working in partnership with those that are on the ground floor, that are doing the work every day. And as it relates to our business community, as it relates to attracting new industry to this city and creating opportunities for our city's residents across the board in industry, touching and accessing that economic opportunity, government has to do that in partnership with chambers of commerce, and in particular with you and your members. I look forward as mayor of the city doing this work in partnership, being part of a team that includes our business industry. So I'm excited to start this conversation in a very meaningful way today and do the work together as I lead this city following the September and November elections.
Well, thank you, Annissa Essaibi George, and to our audience. Please engage. Please don't forget to vote on September 14th. And thank you once again, Annissa, for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Jimmy.